All righty. Hello, I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited to bring you today Dr. John Demartini. Welcome, Dr. Demartini.
Well, thank you. I've been looking forward to this, Heather.
Yes, I have too. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Demartini first, but then we'll talk a little bit about how I was first exposed to his work. So for those of you that don't know Dr. John Demartini, he is a world-renowned specialist in human behavior, a researcher, author, and global educator. He was just recently selected as a top human behavior specialist of the year for 2020 by the IAOTP for his outstanding leadership and commitment to the profession. Dr. John Demartini is the founder of the global education organization, the Demartini Institute, which has over 72 courses on self-development, life mastery, and leadership, several of my favorite topics in there, in its extensive curriculum. Dr. Demartini's knowledge is the culmination of over 48 years of cross-disciplinary research. As an educator, he travels full-time around the world, addressing both public and professional audiences in media, talks, seminars, and consultations where he teaches people self-governance and how to develop their leadership and empowerment in all areas of their lives. And a few other little tidbits about our guest today. He was born on Thanksgiving Day, one of my favorite days. He wore hand and leg braces to correct a birth defect, was diagnosed as dyslexic and with a speech impediment young, and his first grade teacher said he would never read or write. He left school at the age of 14, and at 17 years old in Hawaii, he almost died. And then his life was changed by a message from an older man. Stay tuned because you're in for a real treat today in this conversation. So welcome, Dr. Demartini. So happy to see you.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know before we went live, you were saying he's currently on a boat off the coast of Mexico. So he's not kidding. We were chatting a bit about his travel schedule, right? And as it says in your bio, you are a renowned world traveler.
I have, on flights, I've gone over 20 million miles in flying, and I don't even know how many thousands of miles on sailing. So I live on a ship, so I move around on my ship if I'm not flying somewhere.
That's
but we're
amazing.
off the coast of Mexico today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you know, going back to this pivotal moment, right? I spent some time on your website as well, getting to know a bit about you, and share with us, for those that haven't heard your story, share with us about that pivotal time at age 17 and why that was so impactful for you.
Well, I had learning disabilities as a child. As you said, I was told by my first grade teacher in front of my parents, I'm afraid your son is never going to be able to read or write. He's not going to be able to communicate effectively. I don't expect him to amount to much or go very far in life, but put him into sports because he tends to excel now running. Because I wore braces till I was 4. When I got out of the braces, all I wanted to do is run.
Yeah.
And I was good in balance, and I was pretty good on a surfboard. And so I left home when I was 13. 14, I hitchhiked to California and Mexico to go surfing. And 15, I panhandled enough money to make it over to Hawaii. And I lived on the North Shore of Oahu at 15. Almost 18, a week before my 18th birthday, after nearly dying there in Hawaii, I had a really close call with a breath of death while I was surfing. Actually, my diaphragm stopped because of strychnine poisoning, and I almost died from that. I was led to a health food store, led to a little sunset recreation hall where the yoga class was giving a guest speaker. And I attended that. I never went to classes, but something told me to go to this thing. And I met Paul Bragg. He was the lecturer. And in 1 hour, this man absolutely shifted the trajectory of my life.
Wow.
What he said was so profound that it made me think that maybe, just maybe, I could overcome my learning problems and someday become intelligent. I mean, I was surfing intelligent, but I never thought I was going to be book intelligent, because I didn't read a book until I was 18 after I met him. And then that shifted my life, and I started to listen to what he said. I started studying with this guy. I took advantage of every time I could with him. And that led me to go back to California, hitchhike back to Texas, take a GED, which is a high school equivalency test, guessing and somehow miraculously passing. And then I tried to go to school and I failed again, and almost gave up on my dream about learning how to be a teacher and be intelligent after meeting Paul. And I bombed the test. I got a 27. I needed a 72 to pass. I bombed the first test I ever tried to take in school. And I failed it. And my mom saw me crying and she said, "Son, what happened?" I said, I blew the test. And she didn't know what to say. And finally she said, "Son, whether you become a teacher and travel the world like you dream, whether you return to Hawaii and ride giant waves, or we return to the streets and panhandle as a bum like you've done, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you do. We just love you." And when she said that, my hand went into a fist, and I looked up and I saw a vision of me standing in front of 1 million people, speaking articulately, probably a dissociation of some form. And I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading and studying, and this thing called teaching and traveling, and I'm going to do whatever it takes, travel whatever distance and pay whatever price to give my service of love. And I said, I'm not going to let anybody stop me on the face of the earth, not even myself. And I went to my room. First I went to my mom and I hugged her and thanked her for staying that. And then I went to my room and I got a dictionary out and I started memorizing 30 words a day in a dictionary until my vocabulary was strong enough to pass school. And then I never stopped reading since that time. And that was 49 years ago. And I'm so grateful that I never gave up on that. And now I've traveled the world. I've spoken in 159 countries, I believe. And I just constantly am on the go and speaking and researching and teaching.
I have some questions for you related back to childhood, but the schedule that you keep now, what's your mission? What's your drive behind all of that? That's a lot. That's intense. And I think most people would not be able to keep that up.
Yeah, I do probably, it averages around 350 presentations a year and somewhere between 500 and 1,000 interviews a year. And I write a lot of books and I keep a lot of consulting and stuff. I learned a long time ago, if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that are meaningful, inspiring, and fulfilling to you, your day fills up with things that aren't. So I just fill up my schedule 7 days a week with what I love doing. I've delegated everything else away. I don't do anything but teach, research, and write, and of course travel, but I don't do that. I have a captain for the sailing and I've got pilots for flying, but I just teach, research, write, and that's it. Everything else is delegated. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I haven't driven a car in 32 years. I don't do administrative or finance. I don't do anything but teach, research, and write. I have a very inspired life doing what I love.
Sounds like it. Doing your highest, fulfilling your highest passion and purpose in those functions.
My mission is to do that, and I'm focused on the mission. I don't let anything distract me from that.
Take us back to your childhood, even, the act of leaving home at 13, especially nowadays, right? That's a challenge and a big thing in and of itself. Share a little bit with us about what led to that.
Well, many people would think, well, that's because you had some sort of crazy family or something like that. No, this is kind of funny. It's a funny story. My parents lived in the country and we had a house and a barn. And in the barn was a pool table. And my dad and I were playing pool in the afternoon one day. And after we played a few rounds, I said, I need to get all cleaned up and fixed up. I'm going into town. And he said, son, you've been into town almost every day this week. And I used to ride my bicycle 13 miles to go into town because we lived out in the country. And he said, so you need to stay home tonight. And I said, well, no, I've got plans and I'm going into town. He says, no, you need to stay home tonight. And what he didn't know is that a buddy of mine had his parents out of town, and we had his house, and I invited my girlfriend and he invited his girlfriend. We were going to go out there and we were going to kiss and make out. You know, when you're 13, you kiss and make out kind of stuff. Well, I did anyway. And this hot chick was coming, and I was like, I wasn't going to pass that up. And I didn't want to tell my dad I was going to do that because that would blow the whole thing. So I said, well, I'm going into town. And he goes, no, you're staying home tonight. I said, but I'm going into town, and that's final. And I stood up to him and he said, if you go into town, you don't come back. It's your decision. If you're deciding you're going to be a man and stand on your own 2 feet and you're going to defy what I've asked you to do tonight. And I don't think he really meant it. He just tried to get me to stay home that night. Mm-hmm. And I packed my bags and I took off because I was not passing up that deal. She was the hottest girl the hottest girl in the class. And I was like, not passing this kissing moment up. So I left. And I don't think my mom kept saying to Dad, are you sure this is what you want to tell him?
Yeah.
And he was holding his ground. And this was the last time I think I ever had any disagreement with my dad in my entire life. I mean, he was a pretty cool guy. But I took off and I started becoming kind of a street kid and hanging out at friends at first and in the park and then in a bowling alley. I mean, I became a street kid. And not because I was kicked out of the house, not because I had any mean family, but my dad saw that I wasn't academically smart and that he saw that he tried to make me street smart at a young age and accountable. I mean, I had to pay for clothing, food, and rent at home when I was 9 to try to learn how to become, accountable in the real world. It's a great blessing he gave me. Mm-hmm. And I had to do labor work around the neighborhood just to pay for that. And I'm grateful for that. But I think that was the starting point of being a street kid. Mm. And I lived on the streets 13, and then 14, I hitchhiked out to California and went on a great adventure. And then down all the way through Mexico. And 15, I made it over to Hawaii finally. I just wanted to go surfing because I wasn't able to do school, and I just wanted to do something I could excel at, and surfing was something I could excel at. Mm.
So that episode of, for lack of a better summary, calling your dad's bluff, right? Like, okay, then I'm out of here. Like, did your parents just resign themselves to the fact that your mind was made up, or were there efforts, or like, I'm so curious about that, being like a real point on your timeline where you truly were independent after that?
Well, like I said, my dad taught me that when I was 9, I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I want to buy a baseball and a glove and a bat. And he said, okay. He said, have you mowed the yard? Yes, sir. Have you edged the sidewalk? Yes, sir. Have you swept the sidewalk? Yes, sir. Have you cleaned out the garage? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Have you done the hedges? Yes, sir. Have you cleaned out the gutters? Yes, sir. Have you shined my shoes? Yes, sir. Have you pulled all the weeds? Yes, sir. He said, son, I don't have anything else needs to be done. If you want to make money, because I don't just give you things, because that's not the way the world works. You're going to have to go to the neighbors and find jobs and try to earn some money and value yourself and learn how to make an exchange. And so I went to the neighbors and I started doing landscaping and all kinds of activities. And they paid me. They paid me well. But my dad said, I see you got a baseball and a glove and a bat now. How did you do it? And I said, well, I did what you said. I went to the neighbors and I started doing landscaping and mowing and things, weeding and stuff, and removing wasps' nests and stuff. I mean, whatever I could do. And he said, well, what equipment did you use? And I said, well, the equipment in the garage. He said, well, son, I can't let you use the garage equipment without charging for that. And I said, oh, well, how much? And he said, well, what did you do? And he charged me $7.50 for that. And I said, well, I don't have that. I've spent all my money. He said, well, that'll teach you that you got to pay your taxes, you got to pay for your cost in business. And so you're going to have to make it up. So in the next jobs, you're going to have to figure out and save some of that and put it and pay me back. And then you're going to have to pay me for the use of those things. And I went, darn. Well, but he was actually loving me enough to make me accountable for life. I mean, he was preparing me for the real world out there. And that wasn't, considered child abuse, as you would call it today, which I think sometimes we are not being fair to our children, not teaching them that personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, then I had to get resourceful to make more income. So I hired 3 groups of 3 kids in the neighborhood to help me with the landscaping. I got 2 more people in the neighborhood's equipment, and I was selling the deals and they were doing the work, and I was training them how to do it. And I made like $45 net after everybody's paid off, paid everybody. And the neighbors charged me the same thing my dad charged me. I had netted $45, in some days, which is worth about $500 or $600 a day with inflation, because that was 1963. And my dad saw that I was doing that, thought it was pretty smart. He said, "You're doing great, son, but you need to do something. You need to save your money." I said, well, okay, because if you keep spending it, you're going to be living, week to week. So he got me a coin collection set, and he got me a piggy bank. Now that piggy bank sits in my office today. It's never been opened since 1963. It has the same coins in there, and I use it as a metaphor to think long term. 63, it's a long time. So, and it's got some Buffalo nickels in it and 1901 pennies. It's worth quite a bit. And what's interesting is the coin collection set I eventually sold, but that coin bank has got the original coins in it, and that's sitting in my office as a metaphor, and it's a reminder to think long term. And he said, now that you've learned how to save, now that you're buying things and you're paying things and saving things, you're learning how to do it. Now you have one last thing you need to learn. I said, what's that? He says, I need you to know what it's like to be accountable for clothing, food, and rent. He's trying to prepare me for the world because he knew I couldn't read. So he charged me $7.50 a week, $1 basically a day, $1.15 a day. And I'm very grateful for that, but it wasn't what I liked having to pay. But looking back at it now, what a great gift he gave me, because it pushed me to have a drive and to make sure I did a great job and made sure I was fair exchange with the neighbors and making sure I was able to pay that. But he said that now that you're doing it, you're free. You're free to go anywhere you want to go on your new bicycle. And I literally would drive on my bicycle 35 miles and turn around and get back. He said, just be home at 9 o'clock. That's all you have responsibility of. You have to be home at 9. And if you want food, you need to take it with you. Otherwise, you need to buy it. Now, it's cheap in those days. You could eat for like 25 cents almost.
Right.
And so my dad was training me at a very young age to be independent. And my dad dreamed when he was around 30 years old, he dreamed of going to California and started to take a bus across America to California, but had to get a job in San Antonio, Texas, met my mom, ended up getting transferred to Houston, getting pregnant, married, and never made it to California. So I told him I'm hitchhiking to California. He says, go live your dream. Go live your dream. Don't let anybody stop you from your dream, son. If you want to ride the biggest waves in the world, go. You're independent. You know what to do. Go.
I'm fascinated by the level of independence he was able to give you, right? Even as a kid that had these struggles, right? That didn't fit the quote unquote norm, or wasn't, in modern terms, typically developing, or whatever you want to call it, right? I love that he was able to help you with those lessons in a way that, like, looking back, you appreciate now. I grew up not under the same circumstances. I didn't have some of the challenges you had, but it was a family of 6, and also at a fairly young age. I mean, at age 5, my dad was sitting me down and having a talk about, like, if you're going to go to school someday, you got to pay for it. You got to figure out a way to get yourself there, because he'd been promised by his dad that if he worked hard and did the family business and all of this, that he would be paid, at the time that came time to go to college, that his dad would pay for it, and he couldn't. He ended up not being able to do that. And so my dad learned the hard way that, he couldn't rely on that, and he had to go join the railroad and do all sorts of things to pay his way through school. And so he started young with us, just saying, you guys are going to pay for it and you're going to learn how to save money. And so we did, all 6 of us ended up knowing the value of work. I think I got my, like you, at pretty young age, was walking the neighborhoods and asking to rake leaves and, this kind of thing. And like you, I look back on that experience now, because in high school, kids were buying fancy clothes and doing crazy stuff in my mind with their money. Whereas I was like, you know what, give me the $5 jeans from Shopko or whatever, because I know how hard it is to work and value money and keep money and save it. And so, the benefits of that are long lasting, right? I
Well,
love your piggy bank.
immediate gratification costs, long-term vision pays. My dad taught me not to live by immediate gratification.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that. And people, I was speaking in New York. This is hilarious. I was speaking at the Learning Annex in New York City back in 2006, I think. And there's maybe 400 people there. It's not a big group. And I told the story about this, about my dad and going to the, leaving home and all that stuff. And this lady puts her hand up in my middle of my talk, right in the middle of it. She says, "Dr. Demartini, I would love to know the contact details of your father." And I said, "Okay, any particular reason?" She said, "Yes, I'd like to report him to the Child Protective Services because he's abused you as a child." And I looked at her and I said, "Are you kidding? Is this a joke?" And she goes, "No, this isn't a joke. What your father did is inhumane." And I said, "Listen, ma'am," I said, "I am very grateful for what my dad did. I wish more people would have done that with their kids. I think it would have probably made them not entitled and not, living in a false expectations." I said, "But I'll be glad to give you his address." And I gave her the cemetery plot where he was plotted.
Oh gosh. Oh,
He passed away. It was funny, but she was a wounded person and was angry at men and fathers and was punishing men because she's still a victim of history, not a master of her own destiny.
Right. Well, and this raises for me actually the introduction to your work, which I was telling you right before we went live, going through the Demartini method, like the power of perspective around these things that trigger us or feel like a weight or some amount of like negativity in our life. And I know it's a bit of a shift. I want to hear more about your story. And can you take a moment and explain for people that are listening what the Demartini method is?
Well, the method is something that I set out to develop starting at age 18, literally at 18.
Early.
After receiving two 6x6x6 foot wooden crates of books from my uncle as a gift. Because my mom asked me for my, before my 19th birthday, what do I want for Christmas and for my birthday? And I said, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth by the greatest minds who ever lived from around the world. And she said, you sure you don't want a t-shirt? I said, no, I want the greatest writings on earth. And my uncle sent, thousands of some of the most amazing Nobel Prize winning pieces, great philosophers, powerful books he sent me. And I just lived reading those things. But at that time, I read Leibniz's Discourse on Metaphysics and The Principles of Quantum Mechanics by Paul Dirac. I started devouring that. I have a dictionary out, multiple dictionaries out, just to understand half the words in it.
Well, right. I was going to remind the listeners that you said just a few minutes ago, you did not read your first book until you were 18.
Yeah, but remember, I was developing 30 words a day. So 30 words a day is 10,000 words a year. So I was I was developing my vocabulary at an extensive rate, really more than 30 words a day. Because every time I'd see a word I didn't know, I looked up in the encyclopedia dictionary, I wrote it and I rewrote it. And I just kept doing that. So I'm now reading A Discourse on Metaphysics, and he said that there's a hidden order in life that few people ever get to see. And that entropy was missing information. And if you actually see the wholeness and not have missing information, which is the unconscious mind, you can see the hidden order of life and be grateful for life. And I said, I want to find a way of experiencing that. I want to build a method on that. And so I set out really at age 18 to build this method. And a method is a series of questions that make you conscious of information you're unconscious of. So when you're emotionally charged with infatuations or resentment or grandized pride or minimized shame, and you're not conscious of both sides and seeing yourself and getting authentic and not appreciating other people for their authenticity, It's asking questions that bring balance to the mind so you can appreciate others and yourself to the fullest. And it's a simple, step-by-step, methodical process that allows you to love just about anybody, anytime, no matter what they've done. And people don't understand that until they do it. And then they go, oh my God, this is powerful. And
Well,
I've
right.
taken thousands and thousands of people through this process. And I have about 7,000 facilitators sharing them around the world now with all different industries. And so
that's how I learned of it, was through one of your facilitators. Yes.
Exactly.
Well, and I think there are probably people listening now that are like, what? Like that I could have the capacity to love. I mean, some people are going to understand that there's room for that. They may not know how to get there, right? And others are going to like not even feel like there's room for that. What do you say to those people that are like, no, I can't even like this person has harmed me so badly in my life, or this thing was so detrimental. Like there's just no room for me to feel like I could love them.
Well, that's only because they haven't taken the time to look at the other side. You know, there's nothing the mortal body can experience that the mortal soul can't love, is the old proverb. And I'm a firm believer that if you ask the right questions and become aware of the other side of your misperception, you can go beyond your subjective bias and get into an objective understanding of how the universe is working. You realize that as long as you're addicted to protection, you're going to attract aggression. As long as you're addicted to support, you're going to get challenge. Nature has a way of keeping things in equilibrium. And many people don't realize that. They're addicted to their amygdala's response to avoid predator and seek prey, avoid pain, seek pleasure. And they're always addicted to one-sided fantasies. And life hurts when you're not getting the fantasy. And so I try to teach people how to actually appreciate life in its fullness for both sides. People are trying to get rid of half themselves to love themselves, and half of other people to love them, and half of the world to love it. There's nothing to get rid of. There's something to love in all parts. When somebody's nice and mean and kind and cruel, there's no human being that's one-sided. And if I walked up to somebody and said, you're always nice, you're never mean, their own intuition would go, no, because they immediately think at times when they've been mean. If I said, you're always mean, you're never nice, they go, no, I can think of times I've been nice. If I said, sometimes you're nice, sometimes you're mean, they go, yep. We all have both sides. So trying to get rid of one half or trying to get other people to get rid of one half is delusional. So the method helps you transcend those limited amygdala-driven monopolar pursuits and allows you to embrace both sides of life and be graced by what's happening. When you can say thank you to whatever's happening in your life, and life is on the way, not in the way, you got a whole lot more to be grateful for in life than if you're sitting and comparing your current reality to a fantasy how it's supposed to be and never appreciating your life.
Well, and even, the way you summarized it before, asking questions that bring balance to the mind, like even just saying that to me just brings a level of peace and spaciousness that I think a lot of times we don't permit ourselves to have, right? Or we don't know how to have.
We have to be, we go around and we want everybody else to be accountable. But accountability means to bring things into the balance sheet, seeing the assets and liabilities of yourself and other people and bringing it to balance. And what's interesting is we have this fantasy that we're supposed to be, I want to be loved and appreciated for who I am, but we're not willing to be who we are. We're either looking down on people and exaggerating ourselves, too proud to admit what we see in them inside us, or we're looking up to people and minimizing ourselves, too humble to admit what we see in them inside us. And neither one of them are us. They're just personas and masks and facades that we cover our real nature with. It's only when we look across with equanimity within ourselves and equity between ourselves and others that we actually have an authenticity, and that we can love. We can't love looking down on somebody. We can't love looking up at somebody because we're going to minimize ourselves and try to change us into others or change them into us, which are both futile. We have utility when we actually appreciate people and communicate what we love in terms of what they love. And that's the art and science of mastery of life.
Right. And there's so much truth and pain in the reality of what you expressed about people, basically denying half of themselves, right? Trying to love themselves for the good parts. And we do so much shaming and humiliating ourselves for the bad parts, right? And I think until people actually do the work of walking through the exercise, and I want you to run us through a very short example that will highlight, especially the looking down on, right? How many of us feel conflicted in a relationship with somebody who exhibits a trait that we really dislike in ourselves, even though we're unwilling to own it, right? Walking through that process. And then I also love your process of trying on the greats. Will you share a little bit about the Demartini method and how it applies, going both those directions?
Yeah. Well, both the heroes and the villains are all inside you. We want to break the law of causality. We want to think, well, it's out there and blame somebody, or it's out there and credit somebody. And we're basically blaming the devil and looking for a savior all the time in our consciousness, instead of realizing that that hero and villain is inside us. That saint and sinner is inside us, and it's all a reflection of us. But what the Demartini method is a series of questions. And the first question is what specific trait, action, or inaction do you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that you dislike or admire most? You're looking down on or up on. And you define it, and you keep it to a very specific trait, not broad, vague generalities, but really specific. What are the actions that they're demonstrating? Then you go deeper and you go, okay, now go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating that same or similar specific trait, action, or inaction you admire or despise in them. And now you have to own it quantitatively and qualitatively to the degree that you see it in them. And everybody goes, but I don't do that. I go, no, that's what you're starting from with your pride. Let's go deeper, and let's not make anything up. Let's look again. And I guarantee I've been doing it a couple 100,000 people personally. And when they look, they go, oh my God. And they start remembering all the moments when they were displaying that trait. And then the ones that actually you feel ashamed of, that they're burying in there. And that's why this person's reminding them of that. And that's why they're avoiding them and they're angry at them, because they're reminding them of what they're feeling ashamed of.
Right.
And the only reason they're feeling ashamed is they didn't see the benefits of when they did that to other people. So then once we own that 100%, then we go another step. We say, now go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating the specific trait, action, inaction you admire, despise most, okay? At that moment, what's the downside to you of that trait you admire? And what's the upside to you of that trait you despise? And now you got to hold those accountable until the advantages and disadvantages are flat. And at first you think, well, but it's a bad thing. No, there's no evil or good until you, with your own biases, label it such. That's why Milton said you can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. All of us have had things we thought were terrible in a day, a week, a month, a year. 5 years later, we look back and go, oh, thank God that occurred. Right. Or this thing we think is terrific. And then we find out, oh my God. Now, I had people that go, I bought my dream house. 6 months later, a year later, going, friggin' house, security, cleaning, maintenance, repairs, this, that, that. All of a sudden they're saying, oh, I didn't see those at the beginning. Yes. So when you're infatuated, you're blind to the downside. When you're resentful, you're blind to the upside. The Demartini method makes you get beyond blindness and make you see both sides at the same time. And now you're fully aware. And when you finish that, there's other questions. There's about 80 questions in all if you want to do them all. But when you're done, all you're sitting there is poised, present. You'll see the purpose and the order of why things are the way they are. There's nothing to change in you relative to others or others relative to you. Yes. There's no pride and shame. There's no infatuation, resentment. There's just a feeling of grace and love for this individual. And then you realize the noise in your brain is gone and you're present. And then you go, wow, that's way more powerful than my addiction to fantasies and elations that I've been running my life by. And now you realize that there's a hidden order in life. And there's the apparent chaos was your incomplete awareness, your mindlessness, not your mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. The thing that really stood out to me about that exercise when I did it is, and I've done it in, I would say, smaller ways, like not sitting down for 8 hours at a time and like plowing through in a really deep way, but in a moment, because the way it was described is this process having the ability to help us dissipate these charges, right? And when I think of a charge, it's either like you're drawn towards something or you're repelled away from it, right? We can all, I think, recognize those feelings. And having that dissipate, this feeling of like having peace and being present and the noise is, gone. Just even the idea of that, because how many people are kind of run ragged by their responses to things or the weight of some of these things that really bog them down. And especially this point that you mentioned about not needing to change others. not needing, because how many of us have been caught, especially once we recognize the power of this exercise, have been caught in that pattern of like, oh, if this person would just do this or behave this way, or, you know, show up like this in the context of the relationship, it would be so much better.
Yeah, but you're trapped there because you're living in a causality. No
Yes.
therapy is ever complete until you transcend causality, because the causal game is the moral hypocrisies that people live by. And I don't think people really realize the truth about their nature. They're wanting to live in a fantasy about who they are and how people are supposed to be.
Yes.
I'm not interested in people living how they're supposed to be, should be, ought to be, got to be, have to be, must, all that. I'm interested in how they are. I've been studying human behavior 49 years, and there's no one-sided individual.
Yeah.
You know, we've got enough heroes out there that are turning out to be villains. The idea that they're a hero is a delusion. And that's what's so funny. The more heroic they are, the more villain they're hiding. And we don't realize that. And I studied hagiography, the study of the saints, and hagiology. And I guarantee you that these saints were thugs, murderers, killers. Many of them were reformed opposites. So they weren't one-sided people.
That's right.
They just helped sell the church.
Yeah.
That's why they got the label.
Right.
So when you really get down to what these people are, you just find out they're human beings.
Yeah.
And I've studied enough of them to know that there's just two sides to people. Don't ever be fooled by a facade. As the Buddha says, the desire for that which is unobtainable, one side, and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable, the other side, is a source of human suffering. Yes. And we can simply embrace both sides of life, and we appreciate our life then.
Yeah. Well, and, and the whole point for me of this conversation, right, is in being service to those who are listening and feeling trapped by something like this in their life. One of the other things that I know you have tremendous expertise in is the concept of leadership, right? And the folks that we're speaking to are entrepreneurs, they're leading their businesses, they're leading their lives. What, in your work, what are either some of the most important resources or content? Because I know you create massive amounts of content. You've written books. I know you have a values exercise, which I've personally been through. For somebody that is wanting to grow, especially in the area of leadership, where would you point them?
The first thing I would do is tell them to go to my website, drdemartini.com, and go to the value determination process, the Demartini value determination process. It's a 13-question questionnaire. It'll take you about 30 minutes. And to the degree of your integrity and honesty about the answers, it will be more than eye-opening, because it'll make you look at what your life demonstrates is important to you, not what you think it should be.
Well, and
supposed to be.
That's right. And I was going to say, point out what's, because a lot of people are going to go, yeah. I've done values exercises before. Like, I know, tell us how this is different. That's right. Tell us how this is different.
If you ask somebody what their values are, which I've done for 43 and a half years, they'll tell you a bunch of BS. They'll tell you what their mother, father, preacher, teacher, mores, conventions, and traditions of society are expecting. They're afraid of being rejected by the herd, so they tell you what they think they should be, or an idealism of peace, or integrity, or these kind of fantasies.
These labels, yes.
Labels. I have no interest in that. I'm interested in what your life demonstrates. My life demonstrates teaching every single day, 7 days a week. It represents research and writing every day. I don't miss a day. I do it every day. So what my life demonstrates is what my value is showing. So I'm interested in how your life is demonstrating, how you fill your space, how you're spending your time most. What is it that energizes you most? What is it you spend your money on most? Where are you most organized? Where are you most disciplined? What are you thinking about, visualizing, and affirming about how you would love your life that shows the most evidence of coming true? What are you conversing with other people about that you love talking about most? What is it that inspires you most? What's common to the people who inspire you most? What is it, the three most consistent, persistent goals that you've had that are coming true? And what is it you love studying most? And you consistently read, study, watch YouTubes or whatever to gather information on. There will be a pattern in those, and that pattern will smack you in the face really strongly. And if you look at what number, if you answer that 3 answers for each of those questions, 39 answers, The one that shows up most frequently will smack you and go, that's it. And I've asked thousands of people when they finish this exercise, can you see that your life's identity revolves around that one thing? And they go, yes. Can you see you love learning that? Yes. Can you see that your mission and what you feel you're on the planet for revolves around that? Yes. Can you see you want to be loved and appreciated for that? Yes. Okay, now we're starting from a basic. Now, once we do that, now we ask the question, what is the highest priority action I can do today and in this moment to help me fulfill that? And start structuring your life by priority and releasing and delegating everything else. And you will rise with high integrity, high leadership qualities. You'll be more objective, manage paradoxes, more centered, less amygdala driven and distracted by impulses and instincts, which are seeking and avoiding, and more present and more certain. And you'll be more grateful, loving, inspired, and enthused about what you're doing. I guarantee you, leadership emerges from the integrity of living by highest values.
Well, that's right. And all of the pain, I mean, not all of it, much of the pain that we experience is living a life out of alignment with our values, right? And people
It's a feedback.
just don't recognize
Everything
the
is
gap.
Back to authenticity. Every symptom in our life, physiological, psychological, sociological, theological, are all feedback systems to get us to be authentic.
Well, the attorney in me loves the fact that your values exercise is looking at the evidence, right? Because I think what happens in other types of values exercises, people are just regurgitating or guessing or saying what they think they're supposed to
What
say.
they think it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done enough value applications. I mean, I've been teaching it 43, 44 years. I've seen all kind of stuff out there. And most of it is idealisms about how we're supposed to be. That's exactly why, if you want the opium of the masses, you'll sell them the fantasy of what makes them feel good. And that's not where you're going to master your life.
Yeah.
Immediate gratification and hedonism is not going to give you meaning. What makes us different from the animals is meaning. And meaning comes from the mean. As Aristotle said, between the two vices is the virtue. And that's between the excess and deficiency of function, which comes from living by highest value. When you live by your highest value, you're self-governed, you're more self-actualized, you're more engaged, you're spontaneous, you have an intrinsic drive. You don't need extrinsic motivations. I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't even give a dang about motivation. That's for people who haven't found what they love doing.
Yeah, well, right. I remember listening to you in that video on your website saying, I don't want you to have to be motivated, right? I want you to be inspired from within. And this amount of clarity is what helps get people to that place. I know that you see life in 7 areas, right? And that we need to become empowered across 7 areas of life. What are those? Do you mind sharing those?
Yeah, I mean, the categories that I've broken life into, different people have different categories.
Right.
Mine are not right or wrong. They're just a structure to teach by. But I believe that people have a yearning to want to learn, grow their knowledge, continually breaking through the mysteries of their life and become more engaged and learn. And I believe that you're here to empower that area and create original ideas that you've learned that reflect and serve people. And so I try to help people wake up their genius, wake up their creativity, their innovation, their contribution intellectually. I also believe that people have fulfillment when they're doing some sort of a contribution work that serves people. And so I want to help people build their business so they can actually make a contribution and feel the fulfillment of a sustainable, fair exchange with another human being, where you're doing something that you can't wait to get up in the morning and get and do, and they can't wait to get it. And then I believe that you're here to not be a slave to money, but to have a mastery over money and financial independence. And I want to show people and do love showing people how to build wealth. In fact, tomorrow and the next day is a program on just how to do that, what I did to become very financially independent. And then there's also a relationship. You want to have a sustainable relationship. You want to have love and intimacy. Intimacy is having pure reflective awareness, not being too proud or too humble to admit what you see in people inside you, pure reflection. And then you also want to have social influence. You want to make a difference and you want to contribute. How are you going to make a difference if you're fitting in? You only make a difference when you're living authentically according to your own unique set of values, which are fingerprint specific. And then you also want to have a vital body, a healthy, vital, attractive body. You know, there's a lovely lady I caught last night is 81 with a guy who's 83. They're visiting the ship, and I thought that was interesting. And they were perking each other up outside, and I seen him more alive than I normally see him, and it's because this lovely lady came on, and you know, she wanted to make sure that she was attractive, and she was a hottie, 81 hottie. And you could see them, they still wanted to have that attraction and beauty. And then there's also, you want to be inspired. You want to be inspired by something in your life. And so I believe that any area of your life you don't empower, people are going to overpower you. So if you don't empower yourself intellectually, be told what to think. If you don't empower yourself in business, you'll be told what to do. If you don't empower yourself financially, be told what you're worth. If you don't empower yourself in relations, you'll be doing honeydew crap around the house. If you don't empower yourself in your social life, you'll be told propaganda, misinformation like we've been doing. Mm-hmm. And if you don't empower yourself physically, you'll be told what drugs to take and what organs to remove. If you don't empower yourself spiritually, you'll probably be living by some dogma of Aristotle or something of an antiquated era. It's wise to be inspired and empowered in all areas. That's what I love helping people do.
Right. Well, and part of why I wanted to run you through that is because I want listeners to know how broad your, you know, the content, your books, the teachings that you put out touch all of these areas. What, for folks that are listening here today, a couple of questions left for you. One, where do you like for people to connect with you? For folks that are like, oh my gosh, I've got to check out his books, his website, like whatever he's creating, I need to go take a look at it. Where would you send them?
Just my website, drdemartini.com. Mm-hmm. If they were to go to the website and do the value determination process and then go on to the media section, probably, the media has hundreds, I mean, probably thousands of interviews. You know, I've done probably close to 10,000 interviews over the years of radio, television, newspapers, magazines, you know, podcasts, you name it, probably 10,000 of them. I've written for 1,530 magazines around the world. So I've got lots of those things. So you could go on there and you'd have to be a Buddhist believing in reincarnation or something just to be able to read everything that's on you. You're going to have to come back on multiple lives to do it. There's so much on there, but it's just there for education, and you can just go and probably devour it. And there's also YouTubes, hundreds of YouTubes that you can watch, and little video YouTubes. Some are 30 minutes, some are hours, some are shorter, but whatever it is, some are all day. But take advantage of, that's all I can say. Go there, and there's also live videos and online programs and live seminars and products and books. I mean, just go browse the website and see where it takes you.
Yes, no, I think absolutely people could, which I find to be true, land exactly where they need to land in that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I will share your link for anybody listening. You can find that link and anything else that, like, if you're on social media or any other places that you like to connect, at the show notes page, which is legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. So Dr. John Demartini, it's been such a pleasure to have you here today. I really have enjoyed my time with you. I feel like it could be a lot longer, but like you said, you've already created such a wealth of resources for people to check out. For those that are listening, what final thoughts do you have for listeners? Like either, you know, something to go do, something to change a thought process. What would you like to leave people with?
Well, if you don't give yourself permission to do something extraordinary, you'll miss out on the magnificence of your authentic self, because that's who you are, extraordinary. So ask yourself, what is the highest priority action I can do today that will serve the ever greater numbers of people in the most efficient, effective manner with the resources you have today? If you stick to priority every day, you can't do anything but build incremental momentum towards something magnificent. And find that one thing that you love doing and give yourself permission to do it, and delegate the rest away. Don't do desperate things.
Yeah.
Give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and radiate, not gravitate. Because if you do, you'll exemplify what's possible, which is the greatest teacher for others.
I love that so much. And if you're struggling to find clarity around what is that one thing, go do the values exercise, right? Love it. Thank you.
There's no doubt in my mind, what mine is. I love sharing and teaching, and so I just do it. I delegated everything else off my plate.
Right.
I jokingly, when I go to my girlfriend, I say, look, if because I'm not so great at certain things, if I was to get George Clooney or Brad Pitt or Gerard Butler or Hugh Jackman to make love with you on my behalf, would you still love me? Every time they say yes. Every time my girlfriend says yes. I'm joking. That's just a joke. It's not supposed to be serious.
I know it's a joke, but yeah.
But I try to delegate everything. I don't
I
delegate
take your
that,
point.
but I try to delegate.
I take your point. It's like me with grocery shopping or anything that I just feel like is a waste of my time. I'll say to my husband, like, I think I'm just going to hire somebody to do it. And the reality is he loves it. He'll like, no, I'll just go do it. But I'm like, no, because that's time that I want with him or something else. But I totally get your point.
I have a thing, and I have a little phone here, and I can call the cleaners, the chef. I can call everything that I need, the concierge. I don't do anything but teach, research, and write.
I mean, you walk the talk, right? I mean, even saying
I've liberated myself so I can live an inspired life. You can't live an inspired life without delegation.
no.
But we have all these lies in our head of why we have to do all these things, but none of them are true.
Oh, I love that. That's where I want to end. You cannot live an inspired life without delegation. Thank you again. Such a gift to have you here today. I so appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to be interviewed. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.